3 years ago, at my own Thanksgiving table, I announced that I was starting a business. My son laughed so hard he had to put down his fork. A little over a year ago, that same son sat across the desk in my office, wearing his interview suit and sliding his resume toward me with both hands. Life is a pie, sweetheart. It always comes back around. My name is Dorothy. Everyone calls me Dot. I am 72 years old, and I am the founder of a pie company in Missouri with 2 locations, a growing crew, and a delivery van with my late husband's name painted on the side. But 4 years ago, I was just Earl's widow. Earl and I were married for 46 years. He fixed furnaces, I raised our 2 children, kept the books for his small business, and cooked for anyone who stood still long enough. Every Sunday of our marriage, I baked. Apple pie with a cheddar crust was Earl's favorite. He would eat 1 slice, close his eyes, and say the same thing he had been saying for 4 decades. Dottie, people would pay real money for this. One day, Dot's shop. I mean it. And for 4 decades, I gave him the same answer. Oh, hush, Earl, eat your pie. Earl passed away in January 4 years ago. His heart gave out in his sleep, gentle as the man himself. The casseroles came, then the casseroles stopped coming, and then the quiet came. The quiet inside a 46-year marriage has weight. It sits in your husband's chair. It waits beside you in bed. It follows you through rooms that still remember his footsteps. In March, I finally made myself clean out Earl's workbench in the garage. In the bottom drawer of his toolbox, underneath the socket wrenches, I found an old coffee can, a red Folgers can, taped shut and heavy as a brick. On the lid, written in Earl's blocky handwriting with a paint pen, were 3 words: Dot's Shop Fund. Inside was $7,400 in worn 20s and 50s. Overtime money, decades of it, furnace by furnace, $20 at a time, all saved for the shop I had always told him would never happen. I sat on the garage floor with that coffee can in my lap and cried until the streetlights came on. But somewhere during those hours, the crying changed into something else, something stubborn, something alive, something with a rolling pin in its hand.
That Thanksgiving, 10 months after we buried Earl, my whole family was sitting around my table. My son, Kevin, was there. Kevin worked at a bank and carried opinions in bulk. His wife, Tricia, owned a small boutique and a very large sense of certainty. Their son, Tyler, was 19 and attached to his phone like it was an intravenous line. My daughter, Sandra, was there too. Sandra was sweet, but careful. She had spent most of her life trying to keep peace between people who enjoyed disturbing it. And Sandra's daughter, Becca, was 17. Becca was the only person who always asked for a second slice and then asked for the recipe. Over the pumpkin pie, my pumpkin pie, I placed my fork on my plate. "I have an announcement," I said. Everyone looked up. "I am starting a business, a pie company. I have the seed money. I am filing the paperwork on Monday, and I am calling it Dot and Earl's." There was 1 second of silence. Then Kevin laughed. Not a surprised chuckle, a full laugh, the kind of laugh you aim at somebody. He had to put down his fork. "Mom," he said, "you are 68 years old. You need a hobby, not a limited liability company. Do you even know what a commercial kitchen costs? Do you know anything about food licensing? You will burn through Dad's money in 6 months." Tricia patted my hand. Being patted is sometimes worse than being laughed at. "Sweetie," she said, "who's gonna run your register, your bridge club? Retail eats young people alive. It will swallow you whole." Tyler never looked up from his phone. "Grandma is going on Shark Tank," he said, and then he snorted at his own joke. Kevin reached inside his jacket. He had come prepared. He pulled out a glossy brochure and slid it across my own table, over my own tablecloth. Sunny Meadows Retirement Community. There were photographs of a golf course, a swimming pool, and a woman my age laughing at a salad. Kevin tapped the brochure. "This is what you should be looking at, Mom. Dad would want you settled, not stressed." I looked around the table. Sandra stared at her plate. Tricia gave me a sympathetic smile. Tyler continued scrolling. Only Becca was looking directly at me. Her eyes were saying, "Do it, Grandma." I picked up the brochure. It was printed on nice, thick paper. "Thank you, Kevin," I said. "I will find a use for this." And Lord as my witness, I did. It hangs inside a frame in my office to this day, directly above my desk. I look at it every morning. It is the best motivation money can print.
Monday morning, I filed the paperwork. Dot and Earl's Pie Company. $49 online. Becca helped me complete it at my kitchen table before school. Now, Kevin had been right about one thing, and I will say it plainly. I could not legally build a commercial pie company inside my home kitchen, and I was not about to build Earl's dream on a shortcut. I found Reverend Coleman's church 2 towns over. The church had a licensed commercial kitchen that it rented by the hour. The affordable hours, the ones a widow living on coffee can money could manage, were from 2 in the morning until 6. So that became my shift. At 68 years old, I drove through the darkness with the radio playing softly. I mixed dough at 2 in the morning while the rest of the town slept. People sometimes asked whether it was difficult. Of course it was difficult. My knees hurt, my back complained. Some mornings I stared at the steering wheel before turning the key and wondered what in heaven's name I thought I was doing. But it was also the first time since Earl died that the quiet had a purpose. My first farmer's market was the second Saturday in April. The stall cost $40. I brought 30 pies. I sold 4. 4 pies. I stood in the wind for 6 hours, smiled at strangers, and drove home with 26 pies and a folding table. Kevin called that evening. Sandra had told him about the market. "So," he said, "how did opening day go?" There was a small smile hiding in his voice. That smile was why I refused to cry until after I hung up. But 46 years of helping a furnace man keep his books had taught me something. One bad day is data. It is not destiny. Of the 4 people who bought pies, 2 returned the following week. Each bought 3. They brought neighbors. By week 5, I had sold out before 11 in the morning. By week 8, people were lining up before I finished unfolding my table. Then a diner owner named Sal stopped at my stall. Sal was a large man who treated every meal like a religious obligation. He tasted my apple cheddar pie. He went quiet. Then he ordered 12 pies a week for his diner counter, a standing order. In October, Becca did the thing that changed everything. She had been filming me for weeks on her phone. Grandma loading pies into the car at 2 in the morning. Grandma dancing beside the mixer with flour on her glasses. Grandma writing Dot and Earl's on the church chalkboard. Becca stitched the clips together and posted them online. She added one sentence. "My grandpa saved $20 bills for 40 years so my grandma could open a pie shop. She started at 68. This is her working at 2 in the morning." I went to bed that night as an old woman with a farmer's market stall. I woke up to 400,000 views and my granddaughter screaming into the telephone. By Christmas, Becca's video had passed 2 million views. My life stopped making the old kind of sense. Orders arrived from everywhere. People drove from 3 counties away. A morning television show in Kansas City sent a van to interview me. I did my first television appearance inside Reverend Coleman's kitchen with flour on my sleeve. It was 4 in the morning. I was not going to waste paid kitchen hours just because somebody had brought a camera. The interviewer asked me, "What do you say to people who believe it is too late to begin?" I looked into the camera. My husband saved for this shop for 40 years and never lived to see it, I said. Too late is a real thing. That is exactly why you go now. They shared that clip everywhere. The following spring, 1 year after my first market, I signed a lease on the old coin laundromat on Main Street. Sal did not co-sign anything. He never asked for ownership or repayment. He simply sent his contractor cousin to look at the building. Then half the town seemed to arrive carrying paintbrushes. We kept Earl's coffee can. I washed it carefully and placed it on a shelf behind the register. It is empty now. Every new employee is told its story on the first day, before learning how to operate the ovens. I hired my first 2 employees that summer. Then I hired 2 more. Rosa, my kitchen manager, came from Sal's diner. That woman can run a crust station like a symphony conductor. Sandra came around quickly, bless her. Once she saw that I was sleeping enough and not about to collapse inside an oven, she became one of my loudest supporters. Becca managed every camera and every social media account, and I paid her properly. There would be none of that family discount nonsense in my company. But Kevin and Trisha became quiet. Not openly hostile, just quiet. The particular quiet of people waiting for you to fail so the world can begin making sense again. Kevin attended the grand opening. He stood near the doorway holding a cup of coffee. "Well, Mom," he said, "rents on Main Street are no joke. I hope the numbers work." That was his congratulations. I hope the numbers work. The numbers worked. During our second year, we began supplying 9 diners and 2 grocery stores. I hired a delivery driver and bought a used van. I designed the words painted on the side myself. Dot and Earl's Pie Company, established at age 68, founded on overtime. Tyler saw the van at a traffic light. According to Becca, he posted a photograph with the caption, "That is actually my grandma, no joke." 18 months earlier, I had been the punchline at my own table. Now, apparently, I was a flex. I believe that is the word. Is it not?
Our third year was when the tide went out on everybody else. In March, we opened our second location across from the community college. We had 14 employees by then. I also arranged health insurance for the full-time workers. Figuring it out cost me sleep. It was worth every hour. In May, the Chamber of Commerce named Dot and Earl's the Small Business of the Year. Kevin's bank sponsored the annual dinner. My son sat at a table near the back of the room while his mother accepted a crystal pie server to a standing ovation. Afterward, Kevin hugged me. It was a real hug, the first real one in a long time. But something about it felt less like congratulations and more like a man doing calculations. I discovered what he was calculating in June. Kevin's bank was purchased by a larger bank. They called it a merger. That is what winners call it. Kevin was 46 years old. He had worked at the same branch for 21 years. His position was declared redundant. He received 6 months of severance pay. After that, nothing. The kind of quiet I knew so well moved into my son's house. Trisha's boutique had already been struggling since the highway was rerouted. In September, she closed it permanently. She was gracious about the closure in public and shattered by it in private. I know because Sandra tells me everything. Kevin's telephone calls began to change. He started calling on Sundays. At first it was, "How are you, Mom?" Then it became, "How is the shop, Mom?" After that came long, careful questions about wholesale margins, vendors, inventory systems, and payroll systems. It was the way a proud man circles around a subject without admitting that he needs to enter it. I did not tease him. I answered every question honestly. "Come by, son," I told him. "Pie is better than the telephone." Tyler came first, if you can believe it. He was 22 by then, finished with college and working nowhere in particular. He entered our first location on a Tuesday afternoon. For once, there was no phone in his hand. "Grandma," he said, "do you hire people who were dumb 3 years ago?" "Sweetheart," I said, "it's practically our specialty." "He's serious. I will wash dishes." I looked it up. You start everybody either in the dish pit or at the market stall. I want to apply properly.
application, interview, the whole thing. So my grandson completed an application at the counter like anybody else's child. Rosa interviewed him, not me. That's the rule. Rosa hired him for the dish pit at location 2. He's good, by the way. He arrives early. Last month, he asked Rosa to teach him how to make lattice crusts. The Shark Tank comment has been forgiven. Mostly. Kevin came to see me in late October. It was almost 3 years after the Thanksgiving dinner when he had laughed at my announcement. He entered my office at location 1, the small room behind the ovens. He wore his interview suit. He carried a leather folder. My son had brought a resume to his own mother. Kevin sat across from my desk. His eyes moved upward to the wall. There it was, the Sunny Meadows brochure. Golf course photographs, the swimming pool, the woman laughing at her salad. Kevin studied it for a long moment. Then my son, who had not said a completely honest thing to me in 3 years, spoke quietly. "You kept it." "It was the first thing I framed," I said. He placed the leather folder on my desk and slid it toward me with both hands. "Mom, I am not asking for a handout. I studied your operation. You are running 2 locations and a wholesale business using spreadsheets, sticky notes, and Rosa's memory. You need an operations manager. Inventory, payroll, vendors, scheduling, and margins. That is what I did for 21 years. I want to apply. Interview me like a stranger." I want to be truthful about what happened inside my chest at that moment. 2 things were true at once. First, Kevin was correct. We desperately needed an operations manager. I was approximately 60 pages of sticky notes beyond needing one. Second, this was the same man who had laughed with his whole mouth and pushed a retirement brochure across my tablecloth while Earl's coffee can money sat inside my purse. I allowed the silence to remain. I was 71 then. Silence and I were old friends. Finally, I spoke. "Here's my offer, Kevin. There's no operations manager position yet. In this company, every person starts where the work is. Rosa started at the crust station. Tyler started in the dish pit. Becca began by carrying a folding table through the April wind before sunrise." Kevin listened without interrupting. "The position I have available is delivery driver. The shift begins at 5 in the morning. The pay is $17 an hour. You will load the van with your father's name on it. You will learn every diner, every grocery store, every customer, and every mile of what this company actually is." I leaned forward. "Do that for 6 months. After 6 months, if the operations position needs to exist and you are still the best person for it, you may earn it in front of the entire crew. It will not be handed to the founder's son." Kevin looked at the brochure on the wall. Then he looked at his resume. Finally, he looked at me. "When do I start?" he asked. Kevin started on a Monday morning in the dark. He wore a company jacket and loaded pies into a van that said "Founded on Overtime" on the side. Rosa told me he checked the load sheet 3 times. Sal said Kevin carried every box as though it were made of glass. The crew began calling him Van Kevin. He pretended to hate the nickname. He did not hate it. 6 months later, Kevin sat down with Rosa and me. He showed me a new vendor plan that could save 11% on flour, boxes, and delivery supplies. He had created the plan at night after completing his routes. Nobody had asked him to do it. By then, the operations manager position truly existed. Kevin interviewed for it in front of Rosa, Becca, and me. He got the job, the honest way. When I announced it to the crew, my son began tearing up over his coffee. Rosa suddenly became extremely interested in an oven on the opposite side of the kitchen. A few months later, Trisha submitted an application of her own. Rosa interviewed her too. Family rules only matter when they apply to the whole family. Trisha started at the front counter of location 2. It turns out that 20 years of boutique retail experience can make a woman dangerous beside a pastry case. Within 1 weekend, she reorganized the displays. Sales increased by 9%. When I added her name to the permanent schedule, she stared at it for a long time. Then she cried. There's a longer story hidden there, a story about Trisha and me and several slow Tuesday afternoons spent sharing broken slices of pie. Perhaps I will tell it someday. Which brings us to the following Thanksgiving, 4 years to the day after the original laugh, my table. Everybody was there. Over the pumpkin pie, I placed my fork on the plate. I have an announcement, I said. Every fork at the table went down. Nobody laughed. Becca immediately took out her phone, just in case. Kevin sat upright like a man in church. I looked around at all of them. The announcement is that this pie is store-bought. I was too busy running my empire this week. It was not store-bought. It was Earl's apple cheddar pie. They recognized it by the second bite. The entire table fell apart laughing. This time, the laughter was mine too. It belonged to all of us, and it was good. People sometimes ask whether I hired my family because I wanted to be kind or because I wanted to prove a point. Neither, sweethearts. I hired them because they applied, they were qualified, and they began where the work was. Kindness is free. Points are cheap. But a job at Dot & Earl's is something you earn. Earl saved $20 bills for 40 years because he believed in me more than I believed in myself. The least I could do was finally believe in me, too. So when the people sitting at your table laugh at your announcement, let them laugh. Do not waste your strength trying to convince them. Frame the brochure. File the paperwork on Monday. Rent the kitchen nobody else wants at 2 in the morning. Stand in the wind when you sell only 4 pies. Study the 4 people who bought them. Come back the following week. And keep the coffee can where the whole crew can see it. Because the people who laugh at your beginning have a funny way of appearing at your counter later. Be kind when they arrive, but make them complete the application. If this story held you until the end, subscribe to Vermilion Veil. There is a new story every single day, and behind every veil, the truth is waiting to burn.